Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership, where we unpack the art of business leadership. I'm your host, Emily Sander, Chief of Staff turned Executive Leadership Coach. This show is all about finding your points of greatest influence and leveraging them to better serve those around you. Welcome back to Leveraging Leadership. This episode is going to be all about this book, The Expansion Sale, 4 Must-Win Conversations to Keep and Grow Your Customers by Eric Peterson and Tim Riesterer, Tim R. Sorry about your name, Tim, but I love your book. As the title indicates, this book is really good for both sales leaders, people in this actual sales organization, maybe sales operations, marketing, and even account management who have upsell, cross-sell responsibility. But I would say it's also good for any business leader or professional just to be aware of these types of conversations and the dynamics of these conversations. And if you are sitting there going, Emily, I'm really far removed from any of that, that I would fast forward to the apologies part. So apologies are one of the 4 must-win conversations, and we all can get better at that. Okay, so let's jump in here. I'm going to share a little slide deck. So if you are on YouTube, you can see the visual. If you are not, then no worries. I got you. I will walk you through. All right, so the 4 must-win conversations are renewals, price increases, upsells, and apologies. Renewals, why stay? Price increases, why pay more? Upsells, why evolve? And apologies, why forgive? One of the main concepts of the book is this thing called the status quo bias. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. But it's important to understand who you're talking to, the group or audience you're talking to, and their relationship with the status quo bias. The biggest distinction the book makes is between prospects and existing customers. So when you're talking to a prospect, it's a very different conversation than an existing customer because with the prospect, you're trying to acquire that new account. It's a net new business. You're trying to get them on board. With an existing customer, you're trying to keep them and grow their account. So very different conversations. And the book says if you're having the same conversation or you're approaching those conversations the same, that's actually a mistake because the structure and the psychology and the makeup of those conversations is much different. So when you're talking to a prospect, you are trying to disrupt the status quo. You're trying to displace someone else. Whereas if you're talking to an existing customer, you are trying to defend the status quo because you are the status quo. And when you are the status quo, you don't want to disrupt that. Quick check in here. Who do you speak to more often, prospects or existing customers? And another way to say that is if you're like, I don't talk to anyone externally, Emily, what types of conversations are you having more often? Are you disrupting status quo? Are you trying to shake things up and maybe manage change or spearhead change, a change agent? Or are you, nope, steady as she goes. Let's keep things stable. Let's keep things reliable. We have our system in place. Let's keep that going. Oftentimes, leaders will have to be in both situations and be able to tell and be able to switch. Okay, I'm speaking to this group of people. Here's the situation. And now I'm speaking to this group of people, slightly different situation, and understand the differences of approach and the differences of those conversations. Okay, so status quo bias is made up of 4 elements. They are preference stability, perceived cost of change, selection difficulty, and anticipated regret and blame. If you are disrupting or trying to defeat the status quo, you want to do things like introduce unconsidered needs, show cost of staying the same, introduce a contrasting alternative, and demonstrate before and after proof. If you are defending or reinforcing the status quo, you might do things like remind customers of the process they went through to get here. Walk customers through startup costs that have now turned into improved performance. Admit that other solutions provide a pretty similar capability, a pretty similar functionality. And remind them of the time and resources it takes to ramp up a new solution. Okay, now we're going to get into the tactical and practical part of this episode, which you know I love me some tactical and practical. We are going to break down these 4 conversations. I'm going to share with you the message model, which are the elements of each conversation, and then go through an actual example, so a talk track you can use for those elements. The first conversation here is the renewals. So, this is the why stay conversation. There are 5 elements to this conversation. They are document results, review prior decision process, mention risk of change, highlight cost of change, and detail your competitive advantage or advances. For that first element, document results, here's a talk track. Here's something you might say. You've made great progress over your goals over these last 2 years. You've seen 401k participation grow from 20% to 50%. Your employee satisfaction scores are up, and your employee retention rates have started to improve, which was the ultimate goal of making these changes. Next element, review prior decision process. A talk track could sound like, when you signed up 2 years ago, you really did your homework and looked at a lot of options before getting your entire team to come to consensus and choose our company. So a little like nudge, like little wink, wink there. Remember how hard it was to get everyone on board with this solution? Next element, mention risk of change. So, a talk track or an example from the book here is, as you look at making a renewal decision, it's important to realize you're at a critical point in this journey, and it's important to maintain momentum to achieve your ultimate goals. Any change in the program at this point could create unnecessary risk of losing the positive gains you've made. So, we're introducing risk here. The next element is highlighting the cost of change. Talk track would be, bringing in another vendor would require you to invest both time in getting the vendor up to speed and money on implementation costs and other changes that you won't have to spend if you continue working with us. And one thing I'll say here is, even if the cost and price is the same, you can introduce other costs of change, right? So you might have to switch out equipment. You might have to reskill your entire employee base. You might have to go through notify customers and go through a whole sequence of emails and calls and banner updates in your tool, all these different things that are just a headache. So highlight the cost of change. The last element is detail your competitive advances or advantages. An example from the book would be, we've continued to update your program over the last 2 years to ensure you're keeping pace with anything else available in the market today. You'll get 2 new features to help improve your goals. One, a monthly report showing tax dollars 401k participants saved versus those not in the program, and an app with retirement planning calculators and budgeting tools to help your employees make more informed decisions. All right, so that was the renewals conversation. The second must win conversation is price increases. This is the why pay more conversation. There are 6 elements in this one. The first 5 are the same. So the first 5 are exactly the same as the renewals conversation. Then we bolt on a 6th one at the end, which is anchor price increase with justification. So for that element, we're playing into this anchoring effect, and the book defines it as a cognitive bias that causes you to rely heavily on the first piece of information you receive. So a simple casual example might be, if you're talking to a customer and you're saying, okay, we're going to talk about price. Right up front, I'm going to tell you it's not going to be $1 million. So something like that can anchor them high. The example from the book is, these new services and functionality will add approximately 8% to the annual cost of your plan. However, if you renew before month end, we will reduce the price by 50%, making it just a 4% overall increase to get this level of service. You're making great progress. Stick with your program for another 2 years, and I know you'll get the 80% participation goal and further increase your employee retention rates. Okay, so with that example, they anchored high with 8%, they went to 4%, and they ended with the justification, which was getting you to your 80% participation goal. All right, third must win conversation, upsells. Why evolve? There are 5 elements to this one. The first one is the same, which is document results, and then the subsequent 4 elements are different. So it goes document results, highlight evolving pressure, share hard truths, risk of no change, and ending with upside opportunity. All right, a talk track for document results could sound something like, over our 9-year partnership, we have worked together toward your goals of creating organizational efficiency, increasing customer satisfaction, and protecting and growing revenue. Next element, highlight evolving pressures. Could sound something like, as with anything else, business needs change and technologies evolve. Externally, you have a customer base that wants personalized solutions and instant answers. Internally, you have a changing workforce that wants the newest tools and greater work flexibility. Next element, share hard truths. As partners, it's tempting to just focus on all the positives, but the role of a good partner is to also share hard truths. The fact is, we've heard from your teams that they like our software, but are frustrated at having to dedicate time consolidating data from different sources. Then, once the data is consolidated in your system, they feel limited by the number of standard reporting options available. Next element is risk of no change. So here's an example of a talk track. These areas of inefficiency can make it difficult for your hardworking teams to identify areas of waste, which means the organization continues to waste time. This frustration has the potential to lead to more employee turnover and less customer loyalty. Okay, so we're introducing a little bit of risk here, and we want to be thoughtful and strategic about the way we do that. So we don't want to position ourselves as the source of risk, but we do want to put it on their radar because when people hear risk or they get a sense of that, something is triggered. So humans are risk avoidant. There have been studies and studies showing that people are 2 to 3 times more likely to take action to avoid a loss than to gain something. So we want to put this on the table, but a little bit strategically. So we're introducing risk of no change. But then we end with the last element, which is upside opportunity. So hey, here's this risk, but I have a way forward. Listen to these next steps, and I'm going to show you a path out, and I'm going to paint you a picture of how your world could look like. So this last element, upside opportunity, a talk track could sound something like, but you can ensure your team has the latest version of our software that is so critical to your business. By upgrading to our new cloud based solution, you'll get faster, simpler, and more flexible business management capabilities that allow you to acquire and analyze multiple data sources easily from a single app. You'll also tap into the power of AI and be able to produce more than 50 standard reports that can be customized to your business. All this to improve the speed of your operations, the usefulness of your insights, while increasing both internal and external customer satisfaction. So you end with painting that picture. Wouldn't that be nice? Okay, that was the upsell conversation. The last must win conversation is apologies. And with this one, it's not only what you say, but how and when you say it. So for apologies, there's a how and when component as well. For this one, there's 5 elements, and I'm going to read you the 5 elements, and I want you to tell me what you think the ideal order for these elements are, or think out loud or think to yourself, what is the winning order of these elements? Importantly, what do you think you have to start with? How do you start an effective apology? Okay, so you tell me the order of these 5. I'm going to read them to you now. Acknowledgement of responsibility. Demonstrate you understand your part of the problem or your part of the service failure. Offer of repair. Describe how you're going to fix the problem and work toward rebuilding trust with your customer. Explanation of the problem. Explain the reasons for the failure. Expression of regret. Express how sorry you are for the problem. Declaration of repentance. Promise to not repeat the problem ever again. All right, so I'm going to pause there. You can pause it. I'll wait for a few seconds. What order do you think these elements need to be in? And which one do you think is most important to start with? Okay, if you said the winning order is 1, offer of repair, 2, acknowledgement of responsibility, 3, declaration of repentance, 4, explanation of the problem, 5, expression of regret, then you are winner, winner, chicken dinner. So the first one, offer of repair, you have to start with this one. Could sound something like, I want to attempt to repair any possible problems this outage caused for you, your team, and your employees. First, I have been approved to provide your company with a 1-month refund in recognition that this happened at the peak time for your company. I have also directed our customer service team to manually check all signups that occurred after the software came back online to be sure they were captured accurately. I will let you know the outcome of that review as soon as it's complete, no longer than 1 week from today. Okay, so offer repair comes first. And if you think about it, in the real world, this intuitively makes sense, right? So if you imagine like an example, like your family going to a restaurant. So your family, it's your one night out and you've picked this restaurant and you've planned the dinner and all this stuff. And you get there and the service is terrible. You have to wait for your table. The waiter is rude. The food takes forever to come out. When it comes out, it's wrong. When they have to remake it, it comes out again and it's overcooked or undercooked, all these different things. And you're like, this is awful. And you sit there and go, look, I'm not a troublemaker, but at this point, I need to talk to a manager. When the manager comes out to see you, what do you want them to say? What is the first thing you want them to say? What is most important to you? Are you going to comp my meal, right? Like, are you going to give me a refund for this terrible experience or give me a voucher for a future meal? If the manager came out and said, "Oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry, but Jenny was late today. Like, she's done this over and over again, and we're trying to work with her on it. Our fridge just broke. We're trying to get more installed, but that should be fixed next week. So don't worry about that." That's great, but I don't really care. Like, are you going to fix my problem? Are you going to give me a refund? Because this is the time with my family, and you just ruined it. So you have to start with the offer of repair. The book, the authors did studies about the order of these elements, and they found offer of repair was the clear winner above and beyond all the others. Another thing I would add here, and I know that a lot of you will know what I'm talking about, is when you have an upset customer or an upset colleague or anyone who's just angry and frustrated, they are running off of emotion. They are running off of emotion. They're not hearing a lot of logic or reasoning or explanations. They're not in that mode. So you have to fix their problem. I've been on the opposite side where I'm like, fix this now. I don't care about your excuses. I don't care about your stories. Just fix this problem right now. So you can work through that from a couple different angles. But all to say, offer of repair comes first, and it's important that that happens in that sequence. Okay, next element here is declaration of repentance. A talk track here could sound something like, I fully regret that this outage occurred, and our teams are making the necessary changes to make sure it does not happen again. Our outages should be reserved for planned downtime with advanced communication, and we regret that we failed on both accounts in this situation. Next element, explanation of the problem. So, what happened here? A talk track would be, to let you know what occurred, your software went down after a major power outage at one of our data centers, and your workload was rerouted to a second data center. However, that second center was down for planned maintenance, and this caused your system to go down while we tried to reconfigure which alternative your workload would go to. We have now updated our redundancy system to avoid anything like this in the future. And finally, expression of regret is the last element. It could sound something like, I am exceptionally sorry for this outage, and as soon as I knew about it, I was in constant communication with our technical teams until it was resolved. On behalf of our company, I would like to apologize not only to you, but to your leadership team and all affected employees. All right, so that was the apologies, why forgive conversation. And as we've been talking about all these conversations, it's really about the right message at the right time. And this is talking about situational fluency. So, what we talked about before, you have to know what room you're going into. You have to know what you represent to your audience and have these things in mind as you go throughout your day and your week. Another prime example is when a prospect becomes a customer during an implementation phase. And the book calls this a time of great peril in the relationship, which I kind of chuckled at because I have led deployment teams. So I've led a global deployment team. And deployment implementation, same thing. We would take the handoff from sales, we would deploy the customer on our platform, and then we would hand off to account management. And our deployments could vary anywhere from, on one extreme end, like 8 hours to 18 months on the longer side. And especially for these 18-month rollouts, you could make or break that relationship during deployment. You could make or break that relationship within even the first few days or the first few weeks of that deployment. Because if you think about it, from the customer's perspective, it makes perfect sense. When I would get those large accounts, those large enterprise accounts, I would talk to the team about, look, you have to understand where they're coming from. We always know two things about that company. First of all, someone at that company has put their reputation on the line to go with our solution. Secondly, someone at that company has stroked a pretty big check to go with our solution. So they've gone through the sales process, the negotiation, someone has signed on the dotted line, and then they swivel around, look at our team, and are pretty much like, what do you got? Like, please prove to me that you can fulfill this promise that you've made to us. And so, if you have a misstep at that stage, it's really hard to repair that first impression. However, if you exceed expectations or if you can work to build that relationship, you are cementing yourself and our company as the status quo. So they're coming off of a prospect where you're trying to disrupt the status quo. And now, as you build that relationship, you're going to swivel things around and move yourself into being the status quo option, the go to option. And we talked about during this implementation phase, it's about embedding our incumbent advantage. So having an incumbent advantage is something you want to build up over time. Obviously, account management would do a large chunk of that, but you could start that process in the deployment phase. So, if we think about some of the elements we talked about here, we can talk about documenting results. So, I would share early wins, share early progress, and reinforce. You want to be constantly reinforcing you made the right choice. We have your back. We're going to make you look good internally, all these things. So, share progress. In terms of reviewing prior decision process, it's not about rehashing blow by blow, play by play in the details or minutia. The team would talk about the deployment phase in terms of your overall goal. So, what is the customer's overall goal? It's not to go through implementation. That's not their goal. It's to get the result once they're up and running. So, if we would go a little bit off schedule, maybe the timeline would get bumped, scope creep, all of that stuff, or maybe just something just didn't go to a plan. It's not bad necessarily, it just was a little bit different than their expectation. We would sometimes have to have these catch calls where it's like, hey, we got you, we still got you, you're going to be fine. And remember, we're going through this process to get you to your overall goal. So, having those types of conversations. So, definitely having the right message and understanding the vulnerable, but also opportunity time period that you're in. The last example I'll give you here is the upsell cross sell conversations. Here, it is imperative to pick your timing. They say everything is timing. Timing is everything. And it's so true. It's especially true when you're having upsell, cross sell conversations. You could have the best message and the right sequence of the elements of the conversation and the best, most dynamic delivery. But if it's at the wrong time, you blow the whole thing up. One question you can ask yourself here is, have you started delivering value? Have you started delivering value to that customer? You have to have some kind of track record to run on. If you go in without that, it's not the right time. So going back to my deployment example for a minute, we would have these 12-month deployments, and I would have salespeople and or account managers coming in week one trying to upsell and cross sell this account. I'm like, no, 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 like absolutely not. So you need to back off because, like, yes, your message is fine, and yes, that additional product and service of ours would actually help this customer, but it is not the right time to have that conversation. So you have to pick your timing. The second question you can ask yourself here is the relationship stable? You have to establish a baseline of stability before you have these conversations. If you don't have that, again, here, you could get in hot water. I've seen people laughed out of the room when they pick their wrong timing. Some examples of this would be, ooh, in account management. So I've also run account management teams. And part of our job was to share the status of the account. So we would even have a little field in Salesforce where we would put like red at risk and orange and yellow and green and all these statuses of the account. Part of the reason we did that was to indicate to our solutions engineers who we would partner with to have upsell cross sell conversations with customers how this account was doing and if it was the right time to come in and have an upsell cross sell conversation. And I remember there's this one account, oh my goodness, there was a billing issue, there was a billing reconciliation issue. It was one of those things that got blown up out of proportion where like 18 people were involved and CFOs and lawyers and all this stuff. And it was just a bad situation. And I had this new solution engineer come to me and say, Emily, I know you marked the account as red, but I really think that this product and service could help them. And I'm like, listen, dude, this is not the right time. This is the absolute wrong time. He was like, oh no, was there something wrong with my slide deck or pitch? And I was like, no, 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 no. We went through the dry run. You were actually very good, but this is just the wrong time. They're having a billing issue. They're not hearing anything else at this moment. So you have to wait. Another example, really quick, was when I worked for a website provider, our main purpose to our customers was to provide a website. So when our websites went down for any myriad of reasons, that was like DEFCON 1, all hands on deck. Holy cow, let's try to troubleshoot this and solve this ASAP. When a website is down, that is not the proper time for an upsell cross sell conversation. We would have sales members who would have these check-in calls with customers on the calendar who would like, well, the day that the website went down, I'm like, you have to cancel that. You have to move that. there's no way they're going to be listening to you. They're going to hang up on you. They're going to laugh you out of the room when you try to upsell them while our core product and service is not working. That is not the time to say, "Hey, Mr. Customer, do you want to spend extra money with us for more services?" So, right message, right time. The timing is especially important for upsell, cross-sell conversations. Okay, so where are we? Where have we been? We have heard about the status quo bias. We know about that. We know that sometimes we want to disrupt that, and sometimes we want to defend that. We know about the four must win conversations that we have with customers: renewals, why stay? Price increases, why pay more? Upsells, why evolve? And apologies, why forgive? We have gone through message models and some examples with some specific talk tracks. And then we've talked about situational fluency. So we have to understand where we are with these conversations and how to best position them. A takeaway for you: I would have a think about your upcoming week or month and say, what types of conversations are coming up for me and or your team, and say, okay, maybe I can take one as an example. Like maybe I have one next week. All right, that's a must-win conversation. Maybe I go back to listen to that portion of the episode and write out the elements of the conversation and then come up with your specific talk track for that specific conversation. So that could be a conversation with you or for a team member. And if you want help with that conversation about how to put it together, how to sequence it, kind of some of the different things you can think about as you're going into that conversation, then I would be happy to support you on a free 30-minute clarity call. The link for that is in the show notes below. And that is just for me to pack as much value into those 30 minutes as possible and get you in a good spot to go have that conversation. Oh, if you want to introduce this to your team in kind of a workshop situation, then definitely let me know. That is how I came to this book, or how this book came about. So our CEO read this book and he let the leadership team know, hey, I read this good book called The Expansion Sale. So I picked that up, read it, and I was like, this is freaking fantastic. Our sales teams need to know about this, our sales operations, marketing, account management, and client services reps. And so I put a little slide deck together and little workshop for a half-day workshop where these teams met. And part of the workshop was to meet in little breakout groups and write down an example they had coming up and then share that with their little breakout group. And it was great because it was very interactive and people knew those accounts. So they said, hey, Raul, remember to add this because she really cares about this. Or, hey, Megan, that sounds really good, but remember that this one should go first. So I would lead with this one and then talk about the rest of what you just said. So very interactive, very helpful. And I remember people coming out of that workshop with the little pieces of paper we had where they're like, okay, here's my outline and I feel really good about this conversation. Let me keep this at my desk while I have that conversation. So if you want to tee up anything like that, then feel free to let me know. Otherwise, go forth into your day, into your week, knowing you can crush these must-win conversations and you are a situational leader, and all of this takes you to the next level. And I will catch you next week on Leveraging Leadership.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.